Hey everyone, it's Pojo. I've been sick for the last couple of days, so I haven't been able to record any videos, and now that my voice is just coming back, I thought I'd do one on the Tale of Horus Travers, the 22 card campaign that's coming out for Eternal in the next month or so. Should be like either end of September or beginning of the next month, and I think beginning of the next month is probably the safe bet on that setup. So this is going to be a campaign similar to Jack's Bounty, where you play a bunch of cool, like, fun missions, and if every mission that you complete, you will get a new card, which will be added to your set in a 4 of. So it's a good way to sort of get a bunch of new cards that can actually be played, and these cards tend to be pretty interesting meta shake-up cards. They aren't usually so powerful that they're going to dominate the format, but they often provide a lot of really interesting toolkits to particular decks and can be really, really fun to play. Judging by how much Jack's Bounty costs, this will probably be in the 15,000 to 20,000 coin range, which is to say like 1,500 to 2,000 gems. I'm guessing it might be like more like 1,000 gems. Hard to say for sure. We'll see exactly how much it ends up costing, but it could be pretty interesting, and I'm pretty excited to see where it goes. Okay. So there are 4 new cards that we have seen so far, 2 that we have full pictures of, and 2 that we have sort of half pictures of, one of which is Vision of Austerity here. We're going to talk about each of those in turn. I'm going to review them a little bit. I'll also be putting out more videos as the spoiler season progresses, and we'll talk about those in a more timely fashion than I've currently been doing because I've been, sick in bed. So yeah, first off we have Vision of Austerity, and this card, we don't actually know what an Omen of Austerity is yet, so we got to do a little bit of guessing here. I'm very curious as to what people think the Omen of Austerity will do. As a Huru card, I don't think it's going to be too related to like most curses that you would expect. Huru curses seem more likely to do something like, say, you draw up to your opponent's maximum hand size or your opponent's full hand size every turn, or do something where it like gives you a benefit. I think that that's kind of a Huru thing. Austerity in particular is a weird keyword, so I'm not really sure what this card's going to do, but the basic idea behind it is that it is going to give you 2-for-1 card advantage against any relic, which is very relevant if you want to be sort of damaging a relic heavy meta, like say the Chalice meta. So it is very distinctly disadvantageous if you don't have any relics in your opponent's deck, but with a Huru card you can often do something like cycle it down to the bottom of your deck, or keep it like as a 1 of and then like pick it up with Celestial Omen. There are ways that this card can see it play in your deck even in a non-relic heavy meta, and in a relic heavy meta it's going to be really beneficial to you because it's going to do something cool, and also it will destroy a relic, which is very, very important effect. Straight up 2-cost destroy a relic in Huru, which you cannot do right now. That's something that we'll see play. So yeah, it's an interesting card. I'm really excited to see what Omen of Austerity does. I really like the art on this card a lot. I believe it is destroying something similar to the Maelstrom Bell. So yeah, a lot of cool stuff going on, and it's pretty fancy. Not too much to comment on this card beyond that it does represent probably a significant shakeup in the Chalice meta. Other Chalice decks in particular can run this card, which should make that entire like interaction a lot more fun, which is something that Chalice decks currently don't really do. They sort of just stack up against each other in a slow and unpleasant fashion, but I'm sure that they will be running Vision for those mirror matchups, and I think that we will see less Chalice decks as a result of Vision being in here. Okay. So for my second card, we have Watchwing Conscript, and this will show up a little bit small at first until we do our little transition here, the way that my OBS is set up. So this is going to be, we got a new transition thanks to Miller Tool for coming up with this. This is pretty fun. Unnecessary for what I'm doing here, but I really like it. Okay, so Watchwing 5-3-4-6. This is Watchwing Conscript. Oof. All right, so 2 green influence and 6 cost for a 5/3. Obviously, there's going to be some text on there that's going to make that card playable, because it is not playable as a 6-cost 5/3 for certain. So I have some pretty good guesses on this one in particular as to what this card says. It is a 5/3 for 6. As a Watchwing, it is guaranteed to have flying. So this is definitely going to be a 5/3 flyer. Basically, all of the Watchwings have flying. They are the Valkyrie. Sometimes they are not Valkyrie. This one is actually a soldier, which is kind of a fun indication that it is like, definitely a conscript into this army of Rollants, which are the Watchwings are the peacekeepers for Argentport. So yeah, like we definitely know that this card is going to be a 5/3 flyer of some kind. It's also going to have one other piece of text. My best guess as to what this card says is that it probably has some sort of ability to be played out of your hand for free or to be drawn from your deck for free. And I'm not sure which of those it is, but conditionally, there's going to be some way to play this card for cheap or to draw this card for nothing. And in that case, you either get card advantage, which is something that Justice really likes to do, or you get a really interesting board advantage state based off of some Justice-based requirement. So like for Watchwing Conscript, it might be something like if you hit your opponent with a single unit, or something like if you have no units and your opponent has no units, or like something like that, then you can play the Conscript for free, and that would be sort of like the way that things go. And the reason that I think this is what happens is because this card is a conscript, which means that it is essentially a soldier being drafted into the army. So yeah, my guess is that it is going to be either a pretty fun way to sort of accelerate a board state in a really interesting fashion, or it's going to be something where you just get an extra card for free based off of some relevant condition to your deck. Either way, it's going to be a cool build around, and I'm not sure if either of those are actually what the card's going to say. We'll certainly see if my guess is correct, but that seems like a pretty fair one for me. I'm pretty interested to see where this card goes. Okay, next up. All right, so we have two fun ones. Let's go with the first one first, which is Devoured Thirds. This is probably my favorite of the four that have been spoiled. This is our complete spoiler. Here we go. So 4-cost 4/4 with 2-time influence. So that's the same slot as Sandstorm Titan, which is something that you do need to note. But it is a rare, and summon, you gain 4 health, pay 6 to give Devoured Thirds +1/+1, and you gain 1 health. Okay, so let's not look at that pay 6 for just the moment. First off, it is a 4/4 that gains 4. Now, there is a 3-cost card that gains 3 called Combre Healer that provides a really reasonable board body. That card is very, very good in anti-aggro. There's a 5-cost card that is a 1/5 with Deadly called Lumen Defender, and that 5 health gain on it is extremely relevant against burn decks in particular. Devoured Thirds is a little bit in the middle of the road. It's a 4/4, which means that it dies to a lot of things that would normally kill stuff that doesn't kill, like Lumen Defender or Combre Healer. But it gives you a pretty significant health gain boost. That 4 health is actually quite relevant. And it is something that I think would stabilize you in a control matchup where you are trying to fight an aggro deck. So you could play this alongside Combre Healers and Lumen Defenders, or you can play it in place of if you need to like fill the 3 slot with something like Combre Emissary and Voice of the Speaker. So like, yeah, it's really interesting. Combre Healer is probably a better card in terms of overall stabilization against aggro, but you can stack those cards together, and just gaining the health could be really interesting in a control aspect. That being said, let's look at that second ability. Pay 6 to give Devoured Thirds +1/+1, you gain 1 health. Now, power sinks are pretty easy to undervalue. They're really important aspects of the game because they provide you a lot of benefit without any loss in card advantage. So even though most power sinks are cards that are effects that really don't do as much for your power as you'd really like, sometimes they're really beneficial in the long game, and sometimes they do things that are actually really, really good for you. In this case, the pay 6 to give Devoured Thirds +1/+1 and you gain 1 health is a power sink that is particularly good for the Xenon Life Force archetype. Now, Devoured Thirds first off activates Life Force immediately, which means it's already just in that Life Force deck straight away. It's a good mid-range beater. It's actually quite aggressive. It fits well alongside Katra and alongside Disciplined Amanera, and all of the cards that really, really like to basically play around with that health gain. But in addition, like being able to consistently activate Life Force triggers for cards like Beckoning Lumen, which draws a card every time that you gain health, or Katra the Devoted, which gives you +1/+1 every time you gain health, or the 3/2 Axe, which gives you +1/+1. I can't remember what it's called. I think it's Bloodletter? No, that's not Bloodletter. Yeah, but essentially any of those cards where you have that consistent, continuous Life Force effect, Devoured Thirds is a card that continually gives you activators for that without you having to draw into those activators. That means that the card is really, really strong in Xenon Life Force and should be a pretty solid ringer for those decks in particular. I think the other thing that this card will belong in is big control decks, big Combre decks, specifically decks like Voda Combo or New Tomorrow Ironthorn, which is always a favorite of mine. Both of those decks always need power sinks and also can really benefit from the extra health and the bigger body. So pretty interesting thing. Most of the time you're not going to want to pay the 6, but in a Life Force deck in particular, you're definitely going to want to do it. In a control deck, you might just not be doing anything else with your power and just need somewhere to put that power. So pretty interesting card in those two circumstances in particular. I'm curious to see if people come up with other uses for it as well. All right, last one. So this one is fairly new. This is the one that we actually get to like a day later as opposed to 3 days later. Auric Interrogator. 4/3 for 3. That stat line is actually pretty good. 3 3s for 3 are pretty solid. 4/3 for 3 is sort of tricky because you do get killed by Vanquish and Torch at the same time. It is probably the singular most vulnerable stat line that you can have for a 4-cost unit. As a 3-cost unit, like, it doesn't really affect you as much to have a 4/3 for 3 because you're getting such an efficient stat bonus that if it gets removed, it doesn't feel too bad. It didn't cost that much in the first place. But yeah. So 3/4, the double shadow influence is pretty deep, which means that you're going to have to be running this in particularly shadow heavy decks. But let's look at that ability. At the end of your turn, if Auric Interrogator has 5 strength or more, he deals 1 damage to you and you draw a card. This is one of the most interesting 5 strength or more matters cards in existence, especially since it does not interact with basically any other 5 strength or more matters cards, including Dawnwalker. It's pretty unlikely that this card is ever going to just be like a +1/+1 in your hand, although certainly there are cards that do that, specifically Warcry. So interesting in that respect. Now, dealing the 1 damage to you is totally fine if you get to draw the card. That is all benefit all the time. Cards like Impending Doom and Auric Interrogator can actually cause you to lose the brawls, where basically you are trading damage with each other, but for the most part that's not a drawback, that is definitely a plus. But in any case, so you're going to be looking for ways to give Auric Interrogator +1 strength. Now, this might seem like a control-based card, and in some aspects it certainly can be, but that condition is a little hard to fulfill continuously with an effect like Warcry or with like Inspire or something like that. What's more likely to happen, basically, is that you're going to get 1 to 2 activations off of this, and it's also a very efficient unit, which means that what it most likely belongs in is a more aggro-oriented deck, which is to say something like Stone Scar aggro, where you have Bandit Queen, and you play Auric Interrogator, you play a Bandit Queen to give it that +1 strength, and then like it gets to attack in for 5 with Quick Draw, and if your opponent doesn't have any way to kill it, then it also gives you an extra card to draw more threats. So that's a really interesting sort of setup that you can really play around with. If you can give Auric Interrogator strength in your hand or by some other means like Xenon Obelisk, so just basically be able to play this card out and just get the card at the end of your turn, that's also quite relevant and could be interesting in the Xenon style. But I think a Stone Scar deck with a lot of rallies, a lot of Bandit Queens, a lot of anything that's really interesting, or the Argenport aggro decks with Paladin Oathbook, Minotaur Oathkeeper, and the Relentless Gorehorn, I believe it is, the Minotaur that gives other Minotaurs +2 strength. There are a lot of ways to sort of make this card actually have that +5 or more strength, and the benefit to it is very, very solid, especially since the card is already very efficient on stats. Nonetheless, it is a vulnerable card, so I wouldn't say that the long-term control aspect of this card is going to be too good for you. If you can get it to just play down on a turn when your opponent has no power and draw that card, then you definitely have done something good for yourself in a control aspect. I think really where it shines, however, is the aggro style. All right, so those are the 4 cards that we've seen so far. I'll be showing up with more of these as we see them, and we're going to be talking about each of them in turn. Thank you guys so much for watching. We'll be back with some new deck techs hopefully very soon. I am just getting over pretty heavy cold, but I think we should have our voice back and should be ready to start streaming and recording on Monday, so tomorrow, or today rather. And yeah. Should be a lot of fun. I will see you guys then. Feel free to like or subscribe if you like this video. And yeah, have a really good night, everyone. Cheers.